Okay, room is filling up. Thanks for being here, everybody.
Yeah, good to see your faces. And
Good to see familiar faces and new faces.
and I think along the way, I'd like to know, we could ask people to put things in chat about whether you're writing memoir or fiction or both. And I think in memoir, which we're going to get into deeply in the class, it's these people are real people, but now they're quote characters in a story. That is
Right.
weird. There's just no way around it. So that's part of the challenge with memoir. And with fiction,
Mhm.
what? You have to make everything up.
And I'm going to put up a couple of polls. And one of them is, what are you writing? Memoir, novel, both? Not sure yet. And the other one is, how did you find us? We always want to know how you found us. So I know it's many of you are from our mailing list, but
Mhm.
some of you might be from Eventbrite or Craigslist or somewhere like that. So if you
Yeah.
found us that way, welcome.
Well, yeah, welcome if you're new and don't know us. And we have a fun time teaching together. So
We
hopefully
do.
you'll enjoy today.
Thanks. Rosie, hi.
We have some repeat offenders.
Repeat offenders. We love you. We love you. All right, Linda Joy, are you ready to get started? Welcome, everybody. Hi
Mhm.
there. It's Wednesday, September 10th, and you are in the right place if you're looking for exploring character, conflict, and truth in your writing. And this is going to be a very short presentation, just introducing us and character. And then we'll take your questions and we'll just have a discussion about the importance of character and scene. I'm
Mhm.
Carla King, and you can find me at carlaking.com and at the Writing and Publishing Circle.
I'm Linda Joy Myers. You can find me at lindajoymyersauthor.com, which is soon going to change to a new website, but you'll find me there also. I founded the National Association of Memoir Writers in 2008. And so if you want to join me there, you can get on the free newsletter list and find out what is going on over there at NAMW. Good to be here with all of you.
Good
And
to
you, Carla.
thank you. So here's a little bit about us. We're both, as you see, authors of creative nonfiction and fiction. In Linda Joy's case, I have my heart is in travel writing. I have a very niche market with travel writing, solo women's adventure travel motorcycling by motorcycle. And the more niche you can get, the better. So I hope you're looking at a niche. I also was a former tech writer and a travel writer, and I've was reporting on the publishing industry since the technology for self-publishing unfolded in the late 2000s. And I've written a lot of guides and books. My newest one is the publishing workbook for independent authors.
Carla's information is so amazing. She knows so much. Carla has great resources for everyone on publishing, and I love your stories, Carla.
Thank you.
So I've been writing memoir for 1,000 years. It feels like it for a really long time, and it took me a long time to finish my book, Don't Call Me Mother, A Daughter's Journey from Abandonment to Forgiveness. The reason I say that is so many memoirists go, oh my God, it's taking me 2 years to write this thing, or 5 years to write this thing, and it just does. And then Song of the Plains is a follow-up to some of the stories in Don't Call Me Mother, where I go deeply into the layers of the generations and the way that we inherit things by where we grow up. Song of the Plains. I always wanted to write a novel. I wrote something, I'm sure it was really ridiculous, but when I was 11, I wanted to write a novel and was inspired by an older person I knew who had done that. But years later, I got inspired about what was going on in Vichy, France in World War II, and finally gave in to writing a novel. This little voice in my head said, oh, why don't you write about that? And the other voice said, oh, but I'm a memoirist. I don't know how to write a novel. So, anyway, there it is. I've written some books on how to write memoir with my colleague Brooke Warner, and The Power of Memoir is my own book, and I'm working on another couple things. So, good to be here.
And we have been teaching for, gosh, Linda Joy, over a year now. Just it has
Yeah.
been a year. Hosted classes on the Writing and Publishing Circle on memoir, the craft of short form storytelling, which is the same as memoir because the concepts are the same, whether you're writing fiction or nonfiction. And we just started noticing how much character played into scenes. And so we dreamed up this class that starts on the 15th called Bring Your Characters to Life on the Page. And this is a little bit of a preview to it, but even if you don't take the class, you're going to get a lot out of this session today and a lot of your questions answered. You can find these. I'll send you a link to these slides, and you can find the links by clicking on each of these pictures. So if you're curious about
After the
any of
class.
these, after the class, if you're curious about any of these, they're not all live. One class is on demand, but this is the one that we're concentrating on today.
And we're going to do more of these classes in the new year. We've been doing all of them since last July, I think we started. And we just really found a lot of people were appreciating the idea of thinking about pieces of we're talking memoir mostly, but sometimes fiction. A lot of people are writing memoir, of course, and they were putting their minds around the arc of the story more easily because they were shorter. But every long book, as we know, fiction or memoir, is made up of scenes, which are short chapters, which are several scenes. And so it's learning how to think conceptually about how to shape the story. So it's been really fun to teach these classes.
It has been, and they all have a similar theme and a different focus. The craft of writing a successful memoir is for those of you who are writing memoirs that you really intend to publish. You're ready to go, what does it take to publish an actual book to the present market? And short form storytelling and mini memoir was so fun because it really delves deep into scenes. And now we're delving even deeper into characters. So let's get on to what we've been noticing really when we're teaching these courses about how characters really drive scenes and drive the plot and move your story along.
Yeah, there's all these different elements. We're breaking down into component parts. As you all know, there's a storyteller voice, the navigator, the guiding narrator. It has different names, but it guides the reader into and out of scenes and into and out of descriptions and sets up the characters. And so it's really, really important component. And then character voice, there's the protagonist, which in a memoir is you, and then there are secondary characters. And there's a lot to think about in terms of point of view. Whose point of view are you in? What does the protagonist see and know? What are the secondary characters up to? Stuff like that. You want to talk about dialogue?
Yeah. So dialogue is fun and it's definitely a skill some people have naturally and others of us have to learn. There's so much that is said out loud and in the silences. And I love to talk about beats and things like swerves. In dialogue, somebody will throw you a curveball, right? You're having a conversation and all of a sudden, boom, they say something that takes you by surprise. And your characters do this too. And in dialogue, you include not only
grab my little
what people,
I'll take
sorry,
care of it.
we're going to mute somebody here.
I did it.
Okay. We are writing down what people say, and they don't always speak in perfect English, right? And I love the writer George Saunders, who writes so completely like teenagers, parents, like real people write. He doesn't end sentences. Sometimes people interrupt each other. They look away, they drop something, they raise their hands in the air. And putting action in dialogue is just so important so that the reader can see what is happening as the person is talking.
And it's indicative of where somebody is from and their attitude. The dialogue really shows how somebody is presenting themselves for one thing, But we'll be also talking about in dialogue, one of the most important pieces of dialogue is beats or the gestures, the physicality of a character when they're talking or characters when they're having a conversation. And a lot of times we see people's work where they leave that out, but it's such a big part of character development, whether somebody's tapping their toe while they're talking or guzzling their coffee or slurping a drink or whatever is very telling to both attention and what's going on in the scene. Action. Everything in every scene, something important is happening. When I say important, it's because in our teaching and these other classes, and we'll of course talk about this in this class, why is a scene there? Because it matters, because there's meaning, there's something going on that matters and that has meaning to the protagonist. A lot of people in their first drafts are writing this what happens draft, which is how we have to start. But what's really fun is to help people learn how to weave all these other elements into the action and the what is happening in the scene. And some people write action better than others. Every so often, I get a manuscript from somebody and they wrote action with incredible skill. But a lot of memoirists, for instance, are very contemplative people, which is what draws them to memoir, probably, and you need that. And so sometimes memoir people are learning how to write action, and it's a great skill to develop. I used to be too contemplative and I needed to up my game around writing, and showing action in a scene. And then
Yes, and dialogue can move the action along as well. And also the characters' physical movements can move the plot along in a very exciting way. Of course, I do that as a travel writer. I've always done that because I am literally riding a motorcycle down the road and interacting with people and getting gas and camping and all of that. And it's also memoir when you get to what you're making of what Linda Joy always says, what are you making of what's happening? We just tend to go on. We want to know what thoughts you're having as the narrator and what you're making it as a narrator, but we also need to see you as the protagonist of your own story as a character, as in
yeah,
fiction.
yeah, yeah. In memoir and then in fiction, we'll be talking about both though, because there's different kind of angles of approach depending on which genre you're writing. But the big one, whether it's memoir or fiction, is the emotional truth. And the emotional truth in memoir has to do with being authentic on the page and vulnerable and creating a connection with your reader emotionally. Now, this has got its own challenge if you've been working on memoir because there's so much exposure and you can't stand behind what I call the fictional wall. But some people do decide to put their story, their own story in fiction. And think Dickens, it goes way, way back. And there's a new name for it now, but it's the same thing, autobiographical fiction or autofiction or whatever. And that's great. What matters is what's making that story move people. What is making that story matter to the hearts and minds of other people. And in fiction, we know most of us have been reading fiction all of our lives, and we really get involved in the characters and what they're doing and why they're doing what they're doing, and we identify with them. And so it just is really a huge part of what makes a story really work.
Absolutely. So there's a lot to think about here, and that's why we're having this discussion and Q&A, because we know we run into these problems in our own writing and we trade writing. So that's super fun. Everybody, expert published authors, need writing partners and writing coaches and writing groups and somebody to look at our dialogue and our characters and our plot. And it's a fun thing to trade writing and get other opinions.
Yeah, writing buddy, writing group,
Yeah.
all that is
Class.
in class. Right.
Yes.
So these are the two positions. How can I create characters from real people? It is really such a challenge because there's often a loyalty factor or a guilt factor even for some people about doing this. And yet those people aren't going to read your first draft. So we'll get into all that in the class. You need to feel free to do this. And then fiction writers, this is what I always asked when I was afraid to write fiction and then finally did, is how do I create characters out of thin air? Especially if you're working on autobiographical fiction, it's not really thin air. It's a little closer to memoir. But if it's people that you're making up from the ground up, it takes some doing, and yet I, as insecure as I was, and I really was, I worked on it really hard and I read and I learned and I took classes and I loved my characters. And I think that's one of the most important things.
Yes, and well, we love your Dr. Lieb, the violin guy in your novel, and he just seemed to have a life of his own after you wrote him, didn't he?
Oh, yeah, he's living on in the ether of the potential next book. There are some characters, and many of you, when you read fiction, read anything,
Mhm.
including fiction, sometimes there are people that you want to go back and spend time with. I read, I don't know, many dozens of World War II fiction books as I wanted to know what everybody else was doing in that genre, in that era. And there were a couple that, as busy as I was and as much as I had to do, I reread their book because I wanted to be with the characters again. And this is what we hope in memoir or fiction to create for people. Even the bad guys are fascinating. Like I reread and rewatched Day of the Jackal by Frederick Forsyth, which isn't World War II, but it's a classic. And now there's a whole new movie, which I have issues with. But anyway, but getting lost in that world and rereading something that's the book is what, 40 years old or whatever. And so there are sometimes some classic books or movies maybe that you come back to because you like to hang out with the characters. And so we're going to
Mhm.
be talking about that.
Hey, and so our next class again is Bring Your Characters to Life on the Page. And again, I'll send you a follow-up email about that. And it's for Mondays. And I just want to say it's a 30 to 45-minute class with a 45-minute Q&A and discussion. And we set this up in our classes so we can have the group discuss and run ideas past each other. And also a discussion group online is a part of the course as well. So you can share your scenes or your snippets of dialogues and ask us and others in the course for their feedback. And so
Yeah,
that,
so
yeah.
yeah, people are posting their stories, their snippets, their character exercises in there, and Carla leads everybody very well. She's the tech guru on how to post and how to do that so that it works easily and works well. So it is a group of all the people that are in the group are sharing and discussing the things that we are talking about in class and trying them out.
Yes, it's super fun. It's also optional, but I find that the people who post the most are really almost getting so much more out of it because it's a little bit writing group like. So you can join us, and we hope to see you even in the Writing and Publishing Circle, which is a free community as well. So you can sign up and stay notified and take advantage of discussion groups in the free area as well.
Yeah.
So that's our pitch for our class. We hope to see you there. It's very exciting for us. If any of you have taken our classes, you know how wonderful the writing group, the discussion group component is. There is tech help on posting. It's easier than Facebook. It's right in the class space. It's just like a discussion group. And yes, there is a lot of tech help on that. So no worries about that. All right. So we are here to help you with questions about characters. What would you like to discuss? You can put it in the chat.
We've got some already.
And maybe I will turn off the share button and we can go to gallery and maybe talk amongst ourselves a bit. But let's take the questions in the chat.
Yeah, questions and comments. Tom says, I love how characters we create can sometimes go off on a life seemingly of their own making, maybe our subconscious. Right. This is the seductive element, I think, of writing characters. Like for the last 2 or 3 weeks, I've been writing nonfiction. I'm working on some memoir, something about memoir, and I found myself missing my fiction writing actually. And I do have to sleep at night, so therefore I can't work 24 hours a day. But it was so funny because I was a little stuck in my new novel, and we all do that. But I was like, oh, I wonder what Mr. Lieb, the violinist, is doing in Lisbon right now while I'm not writing about him.
Wow.
What is he up to? Which will get me back to the page eventually. But thank you, Tom, for that comment. That's really true. And then Catherine says, can you say more about autobiographical fiction, why you would choose that direction if you write memoir? What do you think, Carla? We can both talk about it.
Yeah, I've talked to him in the podcast that I used to host. I interviewed a couple of people who turned their memoirs into fiction because, okay, so they didn't really directly want to talk about a living character in their book. So they fictionalized that character because they wanted to make the story maybe a little bigger. They were just compelled to create fiction. There is this kind of trite saying that you can tell the truth better in fiction than nonfiction because you can let your imagination and emotions kind of go wild there, right?
Emotional truth, where you're talking about the emotional truth of a story. And a lot of people don't either remember enough to create a memoir. Some people don't. And so then it makes sense to make it autobiographical fiction and fill in the blanks. Memoir is we have a contract with the reader that says this is the truth. This is what happened. This is what really happened, and not add this and this just because it seems fun to do so. That's not the contract for memoir. So not everybody wants to be bound to that contract for lots of reasons. And one reason, I've been teaching writing is healing for, I don't know, 30 years or whatever. And so a lot of times people are writing about certain difficulties or traumas. And while it's very powerful to write a memoir and stand there and say, this is what happened to me, some people are like, no, that's a bridge too far. I can't go that far, but I do want to write about this topic. I do want to show people that it's possible to heal, for instance. And so they want to do it behind the fictional wall where they feel safer. And then some people say, oh, my family will X, Y, and Z on the memoir. Guess what? You can write autobiographical fiction and you are not free of your family and every other squirrel in the tree telling you, asking you, did that really happen? Is that really you? Is that really Uncle Joe? You know that happened to you? So the fiction people have still to deal with people asking them, did that really happen? Or tell us more. And so you just have to deal with it.
And this relates to the question Julie asked about the unreliable narrator.
Ah,
In fiction, we see this a lot. In memoir, we see this a lot. If you're writing from a point of view, that is automatically unreliable because everybody has their own point of view, right? Everybody sees something differently. This is my opinion, Lynn Joy. We can discuss this. Every law enforcement officer knows this. You go to an accident scene and this person saw that and that, and who's telling the truth, right? So perspective is unreliable, and that's what creates conflict in the story. conflict between characters because your two characters are seeing things from their life lens. Being an unreliable, but the narrator, you can have the omniscient narrator, the voice of God coming down and showing what, your characters are doing, but it's a lot more tension generating when your narrator is if you're the narrator in your memoir, you're unreliable, and your character arc, right? And we talk about a plot arc, how you have the beginning, the rising action, the climax, the denouement, and the takeaway. The characters change too. So your character arc is just as important. Your character learns something, your characters change. And so their point of view changes. Is that are they reliable? Are your characters reliable? And maybe you can take it from there, Linda Joy, and talk about the narrator and we're talking about the narrator voice and the character voice. Who is the narrator? A third person point of view or someone who's in the game?
Well, in memoir, my stomach started hurting a little bit when we were talking about the unreliable narrator in memoir. Okay, so the tricky part with memoir is that we're saying this is my truth, the best way I can deliver it. And if that's your contract, anybody can write anything they want. Let's just say that. But maybe I'm conservative, but in memoir, I and I think a lot of readers are saying, okay, this is what this person is presenting, and so I'm going to accept the contract with trust that the story that is coming out that I am reading and invested in is the truth, the best way that person can present it. So to me, that's a reliable narrator. And we can play with that. In fiction, it really is played with a lot. In memoir, I know people have done it. I'm just like, how dare you trick me as a reader? I took your word about that contract, and I've invested my time and energy in rooting for you and in a certain way in your story. And now you just destroyed all that. I'll throw the book across the room. I'm sorry. I don't like it. But that's me. You asked what I thought. Okay. So technically, though, you can experiment. Now, in terms of a guiding narrator, the guiding narrator still is working with the creation of the character point of view to say, this is the world that we are in. It's narrator builds the world. Now, sometimes, so in the old days, there was this sort of cliche about don't start a book with a dream. I know you probably remember that. Why not? Dreams, everybody has dreams. That's cool, right? Because you're reading the dream, you're in the dream, and all of a sudden you go, oops, sorry, I just made all that up. It's not real. You can start a book that turns everything upside down if you want to. It's an author's choice. The deal is to not lose your reader and not upset them so much they quit reading. So I just think it's tricky. I don't know if I answered your question.
I think you did. I'm comfortable with your question too, because I think that any point of view is inherently unreliable, but you do I love that you say you have a contract with the reader, a trust contract, especially with memoir. Of course, fiction can be different. I have to
Oh,
say that
yeah.
also I'm working with a couple of writers who are writing historical works that need to be biographical, but they're literally in the 30s. They cannot find enough information.
Oh, yeah.
So this happens in memoir too. If you're writing about your great grandparents and you can't find enough information,
Yeah.
what you've got to make up dialogue all the time. And that's where we talk about the emotional truth.
Yeah.
We don't have a tape recorder in our heads, and so we can only approximate conversations, and that's just the way it is. So everything is a little bit of fiction.
I just finished a book. I'm going to have this author appear on my programs at NAMW in the new year. And I'm so excited. It's a very old book, but it's very current. And it's called, I'll put it in chat in a minute, but it's called After Long Silence by Helen Fremont. That book made a huge, I read it 30 years ago. It's about a woman finding out, searching for, piecing together the stories of her mother, father, and grandparents during the war. They're from Poland. So you can imagine what a mess that was. And she uses a lot of techniques in this memoir that are fiction. She'll say, I think this is what they said. She puts whole chunks of dialogue between people that where she was not there, she wasn't born yet, and where she's guessing and she's stitching together what she thinks the story is. And she's very out front about it, but it's such an interesting example of a memoir that uses everything, both her own experience, stories told to her directly, and stories that she pieces together in a narrative. We have to guide the reader through this mess, the mess of their lives and their confusion and the memories they don't have, the memories they don't want to have, the memories they suppress, the lies they tell to protect the children. It's a huge set of layers of, you don't know who's telling the truth. So it is an example of a memoir that actually does everything we're talking about, but it's handled with such skill by the author.
Thank you. Yes. And I've been wanting to get to Ellen's question, which we're going to go in depth with in the course. I find it challenging to get my characters' unique voices, even though they're real people. I'm the protagonist, so getting my voice is pretty clear, but any ideas about how to bring out others? Yes, we are diving deep into this. We've got examples from books and also short stories where authors do a really good job at creating very different voices for their characters. We'll be doing some exercises like voice swapping. So just having a grandparent say what a grandchild just said, but in their own
Yeah.
vernacular,
Yeah.
right? Or an accent, the way people speak in short, some people speak in short sentences, some people go on. Some people interrupt themselves. You see these all the time in your own life. So you can start studying that in your own personal life and just by sitting in a cafe or a restaurant. So we will be practicing that in the class and trading dialogue in the little discussion group to test it out.
Well, I think the best way to write dialogue is to, since we didn't have that famous tape recorder with us, is to tune in first to who's the character who's talking. So let's say not the protagonist at the moment, but these other people, especially if you have an ensemble scene where there's a bunch of people talking. So in my book, Don't Call Me Mother, I wrote that one. I knew less than nothing about writing anything, but I knew that I wanted to try to help the reader feel what it was like in an Iowa kitchen in summer with my great aunts and my great grandmother, and everybody's making pie. Okay. And they were talking, they were laughing, they were telling jokes, they were flicking each other with a dish towel, they were remembering the old days and stuff. So I closed my eyes and I went into the movie of my memory. And I am a trauma victim and I do remember a lot. So not just trauma, but other things. So I have quite a lot of memory that I can draw from. So I'm lucky that way. And I just turned on the movie and I just wrote, I almost closed my eyes. I just wrote a free write where you just start writing and you don't stop for 10 or 15 minutes. So there's different ways to enter that, and it's going to be a mess and it'll be half wrong and all that, but you get something down, then you've got something to work with. So I think that's the best way with dialogue, however you come to it, is to go as best you can into that movie of the scene that you're writing. Carla?
Yes, I'm looking for other questions. Any other questions here? Characters, unique voices.
I have a question for Julie,
Victoria. Okay.
who's commenting, and I'd like to know more, or maybe she could raise her hand and we could have her speak. So she's talking about the protagonist is a victim of gaslighting, which the narrator later reveals. So unreliability is acknowledged transparently, which is That's very interesting because when we're a point of view character and someone is talking to us in a way later we realize is gaslighting, in the moment of the scene, we don't know that as the protagonist. We're believing it or we're buying it or we're uncomfortable, but whoa, what's going on? So that's very interesting to think about when the protagonist character is experiencing something and they don't know at the time what it is, but then later it is revealed. It's important stuff.
Yes. So that's character development. So just like story development, we're showing the character learning about their situation, about other people, their relationships. Are their relationships true? Are they clean? Are they being betrayed? All of that juicy stuff that we see in television series. And we'll also look at a couple of movies, situations in movies that are super illustrative of character development, whether it's your protagonist, a secondary character, or an animal.
So Angela has a good question here, and we will be getting into this, and it is tricky. I agree. My memoir is about growing up in the 60s. My challenge is how to craft the protagonist narrative arc when I did not realize certain things until decades later that my parents attempted to teach me that I rebelled against. So what you have here is, and I can't answer it completely, but the challenge is you have a structural question. Okay. So if there's now when we're the way I teach scenes is that in the character point of view of that scene, they do not know what is going to happen 40 years later. They do not know the later learning. So if you're presenting the story chronologically and you're sticking to the character point of view of a child growing up and going through the years and all that, you can't break out of that, or generally that's the idea or the rule, whatever. But let's say you start a story from the now point of view or the later now point of view, okay, of the narrator and character, and it's set up that way, framed, we call it, like glass castles, framed. Jeanette comes upon her mother digging in the garbage in New York. Short end of scene, all the way the rest of the book is from the point of view of a child where she actually doesn't interpret anything. She just shows all this stuff. All right. Then it frames at the end. By the time she gets to the end of all that, we're like, oh my God, she doesn't really need to tell us anything. We get it. I do a lot of manuscript editing. And so this whole idea of when to reveal what you find out later is truly something to deal with. Now, some people, if they've chosen to have a now narrator, that gives you room to come in as a now narrator after a certain scene and say something. It's just tricky how much you do that. Do you lose the thread of the childhood story if you pop in all the time? Those things can be dealt with in an editing session. But yeah, it's a great question.
And that also comes under the category of giving the reader credit. How many times have you jumped into a short story or a book and it just starts with a situation or a TV series or a movie? It maybe starts at the end where the character is running from gangsters, and you don't need to know what's going on. You don't need to front load your story with the backstory about who this person is and even their name and where they came from, or all of that. You just actually need to describe the situation, the character action, the dialogue in a very clear way. And in the Glass Castle, I remember very vividly, she just jumps in uh,
Yeah.
to the point of view of the little girl who's thinking about her father in such a wonderful way. Oh, my dad, he doesn't make me wear shoes to school, and we can cook beans and eat those all week long if we want.
Aren't we lucky?
Aren't we lucky? All these other people, and I'm sitting there horrified. I don't need Jeanette. She didn't need to tell us about this girl's situation because the character is telling us that situation. So if you're in the 60s, give the reader some credit. We know about the 60s. And so create your character and your voice, and it's likely that the reader will become aware of your situation in that time and know where you are in your life story.
World building, if you're going to have it set, again, people talk about world building and fantasy. When we're writing memoir, we're world building. Nobody knows the house you grew up in or the town or the era or anything unless you put it in. And you don't have to lecture them. If you go outside and there's a smell of tear gas, we're like, oh shit, something to deal with here.
So Linda Joy, we are at 10:45 Pacific time. And thank you for joining us. And before we leave, I just wanted to show you the page, the description page. I put the link in the chat. Bring your characters to life on the page. There is a very detailed course overview, some of which we've talked about today, the curriculum, what we're going to talk about for each of the 4 weeks. Action beats, body language, power dynamic, contract, and also the discussion group. And we have 2 paths for this. We have just the course path, and we have a supported path that you can get edited by us, your story edited by us. Take a look at this page and decide what path that you would, and we would love to see you. We would love to see you in this course. We're very happy that we get the same students over and over again in our classes, which is wonderful and rewarding. And we hope that you will be one of those people too. So again, if you have any questions, I'm going to send an email out in a bit with the replay and links.
Great, Carla. Thank you for handling all the tech aspects of all this. I appreciate it so much. Yeah, there's a lot of great questions and stories that we're seeing here in the chat. And if you're in the course, we can really deepen into lengthy and interesting discussions about all of this. And as Carla said, the email you will very soon get will have all these details of the different layers of cost because people choose different paths like you described. And so we hope to see you. Thank you for joining us today.
Thanks again, everybody. Look for me in your inbox. Bye-bye.
See you. Bye-bye.